Almost ready to. We are. Um, okay, here we go. I'm going to go. Oh shit! I hear myself in the mic. Almost ready to. We are. Um, okay, here we go. I'm going to go. Oh shit! I hear myself in the mic.
You have your YouTube open or something.
Yeah, there we go. Um, we are. Okay, I think the delay's gone now. There we go.
All right. Are we good to go now?
I
Yeah.
believe we're good to go. We're live. We're live. It's just now I'm just putting links out there.
All right, then. Let's start with the introduction, right?
All right. Mike, it's your show. Go ahead, do your thing.
Right, then. Welcome to the first Producers Hangout, live on YouTube and Google+. And my name is Mike, aka Silent Cypher. I'm 29 years old from Germany, hip-hop and electronic music producer. And with me are Kev West and Flux. Say hi, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
How is everything? So I guess we can get a little bit deeper introductions real quick and just kind of talk about who we are, how we met, that kind of thing. And so with this being the very first episode, I think first thing that we should get out of the way is just to let everybody know. Probably going to be some growing pains with the show. We're gonna work on getting everything as smooth as possible, and it's a show just basically about production tips, what's going on in the industry, what we're really just getting involved in, and what's exciting us as music producers and people who are just involved in creation as a whole. I'm Flux. I have a website, fluxwithit.com. Also, I have a sound design company, Flux With It. And essentially what I do is I make drums, loops, instruments, and hip-hop beats, jazz beats, whatever, all kinds of different musical productions, and sell them. And also, I on the website we do a lot about music technology, DIY stuff, everything from building your own synthesizers to finding ways of making your own sounds, that kind of thing. And I'm not going to tell my age because I'm immortal. I'm beyond time. So, and I'll pass it off to Kev West.
Hey, Kev West here, KevWestBeats.com. Hip hop producer. I do electronic music as well, primarily house music and hip hop. And I think a lot of people know me from my reviews on YouTube, my spending some time with series. 30 years old from Seattle, Washington. Been producing for about 12 years now. Wow, time's flown. Um, yeah, like Flux has already mentioned, I'm fascinated with music production, technology, and all that good stuff. And I just saw this as an opportunity, to get a roundtable together. I feel like we as hip hop creators don't teach each other and don't get together enough and unite enough. We don't put enough information out there. You see rock guys, country guys, jazz guys do it. I want to see this happen more with hip hop guys. Which is probably way off topic, whatever. I'm sleepy.
Yeah, I can kind of speak to that for a quick second as well, in just that the way I got into doing hip hop music as a whole. I mean, I've been doing music since I was about 12 years old. I started out doing everything from PA setups for hardcore punk bands to playing guitars in bands and everything. And one thing that I always noticed about the local, meaning, I'm from Delaware. I'm out about 25, 30 minutes outside of Center City, Philly. And in our area, our local scene, which is basically Philly, Jersey, Delaware, and bits of PA, there wasn't a lot of interaction at the time that I started. And I started hip-hop production back around 90... I guess I got into hip-hop production around like 96, 97. And back then, like, nobody shared. Like, it was very... The only people that shared, you had to be in a really tight clique, and even then, it was very, very competitive. I still have a lot of my records from those days where we would scratch off records and not let anybody see what we had. When we would go sample digging, there was a large part of us that was really into just trying to come up on tips, but not have everybody else get your tips so that you could be ahead of the game. And I met a few producers out in Lancaster, PA, that were really into just sharing and trying to broaden people's horizons. And on the rock scene, it was the exact opposite. It was people were interacting, people were trying to pull other local bands from different areas, and the scene was doing really well. I mean, the Delaware punk scene during that time got really big. I mean, evidence of bands like Boy Sets Fire, who to this day are huge. But the hip-hop scene didn't share that kind of, it was just all about competition. And what we started doing, even with we would do a lot of beat battles and whatnot, and when we would meet up for the beat battles, the producers were all real nice guys. Hey, here's how we can make things better. Let me show you how to do this. A lot of us at that time were using Tritons and EPS and that kind of thing. And so we would start to share these tips, and nobody who used an MPC used it the same way as the next guy. And that's when we really started seeing that, there's just a whole world of information that's not being shared. And all these people, because they were so separated, have all these different workflows that nobody else really seems to know about. And that's when I started getting really into like doing tutorial videos, and I would have producer meetups locally where we would rent out a club, and then just that whole night everybody would bring their gear out, and we would just show each other our different techniques and all. And that's what's great about something like this is this didn't exist back when we started. So anything that we can share to help others should be a good thing.
I hear you, and I think that has a lot to do with the internet too. With internet, I think that's where you really saw the information blow up. I started December 2002 as kind of my official start date. I played with Acid Pro a little bit in the loops, but you're just copy and pasting loops. You weren't really doing much, and they came on a CD already. When I actually first had to do something from scratch by myself, I got Reason 2.0 in December 2002, and it was still like that. Where people were like, "Why are you asking me for my samples? Like, go find your own. Do your own thing. Don't worry about what I'm doing." And now you tell these kids that now, and they get angry.
Yeah, yeah.
It's crazy. I see on SoundCloud, I'll post something with a sample, and
hey, real quick, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, cool.
And and so they're calling out samples and everything, and it's wild. It's like, something that was considered taboo to do back in the day. Now it's considered taboo to not do it.
So, I would ask, since you're out in Germany, right? So I would ask about your local scene out there, and what was it like producing out there when you were starting?
I actually started as a rapper, and I live very close to Ramstein, which you probably know from the U.S. Air Base. I live like 5 minutes away from there, so Americans were here when I was a kid, and I got in touch with hip-hop very early, long before the other people in Germany got in touch with it. and it becomes public to the media. So I always, from the kind of knowledge, like I'm doing my lyrics and stuff like that, I was always like 2 or 3 years ahead of other people. So I always have been in this tutor role, like giving people advice and stuff. And I never had a problem with it because in Germany, when I started, I was like 12 or 13 years old when I got the first Wu-Tang CD back in '93. And nobody ever heard around here from Wu-Tang. It was like, what are you listening to? This is strange stuff, but it's good. And so I come into this whole hip hop thing, and I always gave people advice. Yeah, you should check out this artist or that artist. And when it comes to producing, I kept that spirit. I'm never hiding anything. When I started, there were only a few people, so you were actually glad to meet somebody who's doing the same kind of music you're doing. And when it became popular in Germany, also there's a lot of beefs going on, and people getting envy and jealous about others, and that's where I took myself back. But then I think it was around 4 years ago, I showed my friend how to scratch with machine, like. Somebody else did it on the MPC first, but it just showed it.
Actually, let me tell you about that. You're talking about the video with the guy, and he had like the figurines, and he's scratching on the MPC.
Yeah, right.
Using the 2000 XL, I believe.
Yes,
that's actually. Let me show you something interesting about that. Check this out. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Oh, where is it? I have that MPC. That's a friend of mine.
Really?
That was that MPC is actually in my studio somewhere. I have it. Where is it? I have it around here somewhere. I just don't know where I put it.
But since Machine didn't have that fader, I just hooked up my MIDI keyboard and used my pitch bend as the same fader, and I made a video from it. And response from people were so good, and they were like, "Hey, we need more tutorials." And I was like, "Yeah, just shoot over some questions and try to answer them as good as I can." And that's exactly the spirit I want to bring into the show. So people, if you have any questions, go ahead, type into the chat. We try to answer all your questions as good as we can. And if you don't already knew, we have a Facebook group. It's called also the Producers Hangout. It's facebook.com/group/the Producers Hangout. So if you're not online or you're watching this later on YouTube, just post your questions there.
And let me just say, shout out to IMIC and Gary Gnu, because it was IMIC who was doing that video, and he was a bit ahead of the time doing that, and he is a ridiculous MC, and I recommend everybody check him out. And the producer that he works with a lot, Gary Gnu, is one of the guys that was at those beat battles with me, and just one of the guys that for me was a huge inspiration also, because he worked so 100% differently than I did on the same gear. Like, we would have the same gear, but the workflows were totally different, and that's one of the cool things today. Like, nowadays we have Machine, and you have these videos, but one thing that I noticed is you'll see a lot of people will have totally different techniques. Like when I started, there was very, very, very few people that finger drum, and that were, a lot of the times it was one finger to push a pad and step sequencing and that kind of thing, and not a lot of people who could finger drum. And I always liked the idea of using the drum machine as an actual instrument. But I'll notice somebody like Jeremy Ellis, for instance, who comes from a piano background, the way he finger drums versus the way somebody like me finger drums, completely different technique. One's not better than the other. It's just that totally different techniques. Just like Arab Music, his technique is completely different from either's techniques. And it's not about right or wrong. It's about how can we use these different techniques that we learn from other people to help us do better. I don't know about you guys, if you guys play any other instruments or anything, but like I find a direct translation between turntablism and producing beats, and I try to meld the two in a way. Like even during live performances, especially beat battles, which these days beat battles seem to have kind of morphed into a slightly different animal, where people will take a CD or something or a file and hit play, and then they dance. And when I came up, if you danced on stage as a producer, you really would have laughed out of the building and probably
Pretty much.
face. But I mean, it's fine. I mean, if people want to do it that way, at least they're having fun. But you know, when we came up, it was beat battles where you brought your actual equipment, you would manipulate the beats, if not make the beat live, but manipulate the beat live. And you would have things like disses inside of the beats. I would do a lot of tracks that would involve like I got to the point where I liked having themes for every beat battle. So then we would do things like I would just drop Mr. T samples all the way through it, just dissing people. You know, I pity the fool, that kind of thing. And but yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I know a lot of people over in Germany that I've met, and the music scene as a whole, it seems very, very different over there. The culture seems very different as far as when people are getting into hip hop or getting into breakcore, or you know, the electronic scene over there is also completely different. The electronic scene in America is very constrained, in my personal opinion. I mean, there's a lot of people out there doing interesting things, but it's not as accepted on a larger whole that I've seen, at least. But maybe that's also, maybe I have a skewed opinion on that because I have friends that are, you know, into really odd breakcore and strange music.
Oh no, I think you're right on point. It's like if you're in America, maybe, and this could be the Seattle scene here too. If you're black, you're doing hip hop. Period. You're doing hip hop. You're doing soul music. They don't want to see you doing anything else. Like they look at you crazy. Like people look at me crazy when I say, you know, I make a lot of house now. And a lot of the reason I do that is because of the way business is handled on a hip hop spectrum. It's like I can get undercut, severely undercut, for producing. Actually, I made a comment on Twitter last night. Why is it I see so many dope producers? They have platinum plaques and they're selling beats for $20 on SoundClick. And that wasn't even a diss. That wasn't meant to disrespect those guys. That's just how this business is set up for hip hop. They undercut the producers. The artists, you know, they get the fame, they get the glory, they get, of course, all their money. They own the rights to the song, so then they get the sync licensing with it. You know, they're getting all this money for it, and you know, the producer songs now, their pop albums are hot for like a week now. So it's like, yeah, you know, I produce, say, for Joel Ortiz or for 50 Cent, maybe even on a mixtape. Yeah, well, everybody does now.
Yeah, and I think there's a large difference in opinion on that kind of thing. Like, you know, there's a more traditional camp of people who are still very much into the you know, get a deal. Get a production deal, you know, go the traditional route, and that's, you know, that's good for people who have certain connections to do that. But the fact of the matter is that a quality deal, like I've got a few friends that I know that have really quality deals, and you know, not everybody is going to be that lucky. You know, not everybody's going to. To me, that's more of a golden ticket angle, whereas in this day and age, with the way that the internet is set up, you have so many opportunities to be your own label, to do things your own way. But also, you know, you can't be stupid. You know, because everyone has those same opportunities, the market gets flooded. And when the market gets flooded, you've got to look at ways of either A, standing out, B, just plain and simple being so much better that the cream rises to the crop. Or really what you got to look at is what's financially viable for you. You know what I mean? Like, what is honestly going to make you profit? And that can be everything from I know producers that make very good living just making that stay local and do productions for, you know, local TV shows. They do productions for commercials, you know, radio, that kind of thing. And I know guys that you know, are on FM radio, and I know guys that are on like satellite radio. They're working angles like that. There's so many different angles that I feel like the majority of people that get into making music, especially hip hop, they look at it like, okay, well, I want to do it, but I don't want to be taken advantage of, and I want to make money. Well, you don't get into making hip hop music to make money. You're gonna lose money for a long period of time before you ever make money. I mean, the gear alone, even if you're using software, is gonna cost you money. Let's say you went the completely immoral route and was using cracks, and you were using your mom's laptop, and you put absolutely no money out. Even if you did that, you're still eventually going to come to a point where you're going to have to pay for certain storage fees, online storage, these other things. There's money involved no matter how you cut it,
Right.
So when people jump in and they say, oh, well, I'm going to get this money, I look at them like, okay, either you're an idiot, you're extremely brilliant and you know it and nobody else sees it yet, or realistically speaking, you just don't know what the hell you're talking about. If you're really trying to get into it for money, you got to have a long-term plan, and you got to have a plan that makes sense and isn't a golden ticket. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like these guys that come in expecting everything to be handed to them is silly to me. I mean, you said you've been producing for how long, Kev?
I started 2003.
2003. How long you been doing it, Mike?
Around 15 years now, so 99, 2000.
We can all agree it's not a get rich quick scheme. I mean, I know a producer locally that is doing $1 million tracks, and even him, he got into the game extremely young, and now he's producing for Game and other producers. But even for him, it was a very long period. He had extremely good connections coming up, and even with that, it was many years before he saw, and he did the battle scene, he did everything, and I look at kids today and I'm like, you want to sell your beats for $20 online, but everybody's selling beats online, everybody's giving away beats online. Like, how is that going to separate you from the rest? You know what I mean? What is the chance that your video is going to be the one that goes viral? Is that really what you're banking on, as a chance?
Exactly. Like, I look at, especially because, we all do YouTube. I am a YouTube fanatic. I don't watch TV no more. And I watch some of these musicians, people that I've never heard of, that, they might do, great songs or original songs, cover songs, and they have, 10 million subscribers. Never heard of them.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people on YouTube that way.
And on top of that, a lot of the major music companies these days, that's where they're putting their money into. They're not putting their money so much into TV as they are, online content these days.
Yeah, it's cheaper.
I mean, it's still there. It's still there to an extent. But yeah, when you get linked up with a production company doing things like doing soundtracks and whatnot, you're more likely to have a long-term paycheck than you are somebody who's trying to do something as more of a flash in the pan.
Right. Exactly, and it's like you have to, like you said, you have to play the game right. You have to have a long-term plan. I've had guys ask me, why haven't I gone viral yet? I've been doing YouTube now for actually just coming on 2 years today, and what I tell people is, especially I go back and I look at these guys that have 1 million views or 1 million subscribers. They've been doing it for 8-9 years,
or have very smart ways of cross-promoting. I mean, there's that too. If that's your number one game, doing YouTube, and that's fine. If you can legitimately, make quality money out of it, then you need to be willing to put into the work. I know I have friends that do YouTube channels, that do websites and whatnot, and I can tell you, these guys, I mean, they don't sleep. They work nonstop. It's not a simple solution. It's
exactly.
I think the difference really comes down to
work ethic.
Work ethic, and the fact that if you really legitimately have a passion for something, it's not going to bother you to work a 13-hour day. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, you don't mind, working nonstop. And I know people will say, oh, on Twitter they have they're constantly posting on Twitter, don't sleep, and still working, I'm not sleeping.
But you're tweeting.
If you're on Twitter, you're not working. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's kind of silly. It's like, well, yeah, sure, that's all well and good that you're saying that you're a CEO, but are you a CEO of a quality company is the question,
Exactly.
And
some people also need to realize it's a marathon, not a race.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, me personally, I'm fully aware of the fact that as a music producer and sound designer, I don't have medical benefits. I mean, you know, it's nice that now there's, you know, Affordable Care Act and things like that in America, but the fact of the matter is that no pension plan, you know, what you make is what you put into it, you know, and
Hmm.
you got to be willing to accept that. You know, that's not a, you know, if you, but of course, then again, at the same time, I'd rather be barely making a living as a music artist that's actually making a living than someone who hates their life working in a factory or something. You know,
Exactly,
you
exactly.
you
I'm
can't
not
see what
gonna.
you're doing, then you're doing something wrong. You know, so I would say let's move on to some interesting topics as far as what's coming up. Because I know we got NAMM coming up, and when NAMM starts to come up, different products start getting announced. First one
Mhm.
that's getting announced is, or at least that we've really seen on there, is the fact that Dave Smith is showing us the Prophet, the new Prophet 12 module. Um,
Sexy.
can we show the video? Do we
Uh,
have the video to show it?
Mike, do you have the video?
Hold on a second. Let me see if
Okay.
I can load it
Well,
up.
while he's doing that, I just want to say something interesting about the video. I watched this video, and I also watched a lot of the comments, and I was really interested because Dave Smith, who I couldn't respect more. I mean, he is a legend. I was really surprised when I saw him talk about how he loves, you know, tweaking knobs on synthesizers like this, and then I saw the front layout design, and my heart completely sank. Um, I'm a kind of guy who's very tactile. I like hardware. I like being able to grab knobs. I mean, as you can see, I like knobs. I like being able to turn things. I like instant gratification for what I'm working on. And when I saw this new Prophet 12, my first thought was, this is not what I was expecting at all. What was your thoughts on it, Kev?
Yeah, sorry guys. I think I cut you off. I didn't know it started already.
That's
It's all
okay.
good. It's all good. Play the video. Play the
I
video.
didn't
Play it.
actually see the video though. Do you have it set up so that we can actually see it? I think.
You should be able to see it. It's on.
You might have hit the screen capture button on your end.
Mhm.
Oh really? I think my internet can't handle this. Let me try again. Did you see it?
I see it now. You have to click the you know, the other people in the Hangout. We have to click the YouTube button, and let me try something here.
Let me answer my phone right quick.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see if I can screen share it for you, and then you can play it.
Now I'm curious if the people on YouTube can see this too. Then can I see it now? Yeah, I had to hit the button in the
Well, I'm
Hangout.
gonna screen share it, and then you can just click on my screen. Kev, you can click on me, and then that should make it viewable, I would
Oh,
think.
I already see it. I already see it.
You see it?
Some size and sound editing.
There's no
For
video.
example, I can just hit oscillator 1, I can change the shape, I can change the tuning, I can go and add FM, I can do whatever I want. I could easily go back to the filter, change the low pass frequency, adjust the envelope. It's all very quick and easy. The signal flow is laid out logically in the front panel, and you can select any synth block with a simple switch hit. And then after that, you use the crisp OLED display to edit your sound. Let me show you how easy this is.
Now let me stop it here, and let me just say, while I can completely understand the way that he's synth blocking it, and you know, I get that, but that in no way replaces having actual knob for a parameter. If you look at something like the Prophet 08 module, to me that is still, I mean, sure, it might cost more money to put those knobs on there, but when you're paying how much money they're asking for this, I just can't see skimping on knobs when, you know.
And knobs are cheap.
You know, I mean, there's production costs involved. I can get that, but the thing that I don't understand is, I mean, there's just a massive amount of wasted space on that panel, and I'm not saying I want it to be cramped, but at the same time, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking to myself, that is just an outrageous amount of wasted space on that front panel. You know, I mean, they're asking, I think MSRP on that thing is 15, something like that.
I think it is 15.
I mean, that's a lot of money. Granted, you know, listen, fact is it's what? Digital oscillators with analog filters. I don't know if it's analog envelopes or not. I'm not sure. But to me, it's like, you know, if you're doing that kind of thing, then put some knobs on the damn thing.
Exactly. And I'm looking for it now. I'm on that.
On this, when you're in the studio and you're just designing sounds, I think you can live with all these menus on the screen. But when you're live, that's a lack of a feature. You need to edit it live so much. I mean, when you're in the studio and you know you can set it up via USB and you can automate it on its own lanes and stuff in the tracks, I don't see it necessarily to have all the knobs available. When it comes to the stage, it should be there. You need dedicated buttons live.
And even as a sound designer, though, I mean, like when you're doing something like that, I mean, I could maybe see if there was like a quick breakout box or something, or he was releasing MIDI templates for lots of different controllers that are out there. But even then, unless you're doing some really fancy work, you're gonna get stepping on the filter and things like that. You're gonna get because MIDI is a limited range, you know, as far as what it can use. I mean, sure, they could use things like OSC and, you know, higher definition protocols, but when you're paying $1,500 for a rack mount synthesizer these days, when there is, I mean, let's be realistic. There's a large push these days towards knobs, hands-on control. You look at things like Spark, Machine, the Arturia Keylab series, and how that integrates with its software. Even software is going very much towards, you know, hands-on, multiple parameters being able to be tweaked at one time. And sure, you've only got two hands, but at the same time, it's different when, you know, I can grab a modular or a mini brood or something, you know, or even a Keylab, and quickly, you know, go here, 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 without having to hit this button, you know, 4 button presses, and, you know, only being able to see 4 parameters on a screen at a time. And I gotta say, like, the screen on that module is beautiful. I've seen it in person. I was there when they unveiled the Prophet 12 keyboard. The screen is gorgeous, but to only have that method of interaction, it causes a different mental workflow. When you don't see all the parameters in that same way, it's different than if you just had it right there and you could just instantly kind of flick a knob or something, you know.
But when I got it right, it's only one level in the menu.
Yeah.
Switch, you know, it's like it's not like you have in one knob for 4 submenus or something like that.
Yeah,
so
yeah. It seems, and I think that's what the blocks are about, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like pushing the shift button. I mean, for myself, I could live with that, but I'm not programming Sims the whole day, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, like, there's people who that workflow is going to be great for, and, you know, they're probably going to be very happy about it. But in that same price point, looking at other competition, such as the Virus TI, to me, it's like, when you're looking at these other digital synths that, are in a small form factor, very dense feature set, it's like, to me, that just, I'm still honestly more interested in a Prophet 08 than a Prophet 12, to be perfectly honest with you. I personally just, it speaks to me more, but, I mean, I recognize the fact that there's very different sounds and very different use cases, but it just doesn't, when I saw it, to me, it just did not do it for me at all. It instilled very little lust.
Now, when you say now, is that including the keyboards, or are you talking about just the rack mounts here?
Both. Yeah.
See, I don't know a whole lot about the Prophet 08. I honestly ignored it. I saw the Prophet 12. I was like, ooh, this is nice.
Like, and I don't want to get into a pissing contest as far as
Oh
digital
no,
versus analog either,
they're
because
both,
I
they're
know
both
a
good.
lot of people were really upset about the fact that the Prophet 12 had digital oscillators versus the Prophet 08, which is DCOs.
Hmm.
And I mean, listen, Dave Smith had his reasons for what he did. He felt like he could do more with more interesting sound shaping with the digital design, and that's fine. I personally am of the mindset where not all, but the majority of hardware that I'm buying, if I'm going to buy hardware, I might as well buy analog because I like the sound of analog. I like the imperfections in analog.
Hmm.
Um, and if I want a really good digital synth, that's where the software comes in, because I can get really
Right.
great audio interfaces, and I could be running something like Monarch, which Monarch sounds ridiculously good. Now, granted, Monarch is also not nearly as technically capable as something like Prophet 12. And Prophet 12 also has those analog filters, which is cool. But I mean, you can also look at things like Mutable Instruments has the, and I'm going to butcher the name here, the Shruti, and it has different filter cards in it. There's lots of different hybrids out there that you can get. So to say, I'm going to pay $1,500 for that when it's something that I could somewhat similarly emulate. I just, and it doesn't give me any benefit in tactile control. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
then that kind of makes it not as interesting to me. For instance, when I load up a synthesizer and I'm using Machine 2, it's auto mapping right onto Machine 2 with 8 knobs, and I almost feel like that's more immediate than any of those. Than something like a block diagram that I'm switching and getting 4 knobs. On top of that, I would say there's some other really interesting synths that are coming out these days for a much lower price point as well. I don't want to get too hung up on price because there are certain guys that can afford to pay insane amounts of money for these types of synths. But when you look at things like, and granted, it's not true polyphony in the way that the Prophet is, but you look at things like the Pulse coming out, and hopefully, Arturia comes out with a poly version of the Brute, which I'm hoping
I think
for.
we're all waiting for that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like if you're going to be doing these poly digital synths, I don't know.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and especially like you said, like if you're gonna buy a hardware synth, go analog or not at all.
Mhm.
I think at this point, with so much competition out there, how do you how do you hold yourself apart? And like you said, with the knobs here, yeah, that would set them apart. How do you make it easier to use? People don't like menu diving on hardware synths. That's a lot of the reason why people like software synths. Me, I
Yeah.
like it because it takes less space. So I'm like I think I'm actually all software at this point. I have my S3000 still, but I think I've sold all my other hardware. I'm looking at maybe getting a mini brute later this year, but other than that,
Do you guys
um,
sample a lot or no?
I have
Not
at one
any.
point, but I haven't sampled much in the last couple years.
Kev, you need more light on your
And
face. I can barely see you.
that's just because I'm black as hell. That's all it is. Don't pay
Oh,
that
is
mind.
that
Don't
what
pay
it
that no
is?
mind. No, it's just it's a dark day out, and I'm using the
I
light
hear you.
naturally in my room.
Um, I mean, Mike, you keep a lot of you keep a lot of hardware in there. I'm looking at your setup back there. What are you using? You're using analog turntable, all right? You got 1200 over there or
Right.
something?
I have an analog turntable for sampling, but I barely use it.
Okay.
I got a MIDI master keyboard with controls and faders. I got the Machine Studio here, and I got a little Behringer MIDI keyboard for playing the iPad synths I got.
Well, let me ask you something. What did you start out on? Like, what was, and I don't want to say what was your very first piece of gear, but like, what was your first, what you would consider your first quality setup that you were using?
I think it was all software. I bought Fruity Loops back in the days.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I was using Fast Tracker. I don't know if anybody can remember this. It was like a MS-DOS.
Yeah, yeah.
8-bit. I don't know what it was, but it sounded good, and it was terrible from the handling, but it sounded good for the time.
And what about you, Kev?
First
Reason
piece.
2.0. I was a heavy Reason user for a long, long time. But the reason I got off Reason, I wanted, like you said, the immediacy of knobs. In 3.0, they added remote, but remote, they haven't updated it since 3.0, and it doesn't necessarily, and it's not as smooth as I'd like it to be. So I got
Are you
hardware.
still a Reason user?
No, actually, when Machine 2.0 came out, I kept it until 2.0 came out, and then I sold my license. Now I'm all Machine.
Okay. Yeah, see, I started out using hardware, and I stayed hardware for up until Machine 1 came, was the first full-on software-style production that I was doing, because I started with EMU MP7 and an MPC 2000. That was like my main, like, that was what I did like a good 10 years of production on.
That's a good setup.
And but when I and I was using digital tracking too. Like I was using what did I use? Like after I went, like, I mean, granted, I went through the cassette phase with everybody else, you know, of the Porta Studios, but when I actually started investing real money into it, I had bought a Kai DPS-12. I had that for a while, and then I went to the Roland VS-1680, and but you know, that's all actual hands-on faders and everything. And when I switched over to getting my first MacBook and software setup, I got a MacBook Pro, and I got a M Audio Project Mix and Logic to go with it. And because I couldn't stand the idea of having to produce with a mouse, I couldn't stand the idea of having to click on things and, you know, being limited in that way. Like, that to me was so non-musical that I couldn't bear to even think like that. And
that's what got me off Reason, kind of, because
and I have friends that made the move with me, that were hardware with me all along and made the move, and they ended up getting rid of the majority of their stuff. And even though when they went software in the same way that I did, with lots of hands-on control, they ended up preferring the mouse. Like, I've got friends who prefer to click into a matrix and make their beats that way now, which is, I mean, to me, it's completely counterintuitive, but my workflow is not your workflow, is not someone else's workflow. It's not better or worse, it's just a different workflow. Exactly. And like my buddy
I think it's because it was so much faster. You know, when I had a Akai S900 back in the days, or S950.
Yeah, I had a 900.
It needed 2 minutes to boot up. It needed like 30 seconds to load the kick drum from a floppy disk, you know?
That's what I was about to say. The floppies took forever.
Slow. That's why I got rid of it, because I loved the sound of it, but it was so slow. In the same time, I loaded up a drum kit. I was producing a whole beat on the computer, you know?
Well, I used to complain because I still have my S3000. When I left Reason, that's one of the first things I got was the S3000, and it took me, I think it takes like 45 seconds to load a kick drum, but you're right, it takes like 2-3 minutes just to load a whole drum kit. It was ridiculous.
One of the things that I do now, like, because I still keep a lot of like my older gear, like I try to hang on to gear. Like, I'm not a big fan of selling off gear. If I can keep my gear, I will keep it, because I find that when I sell gear, I end up regretting it. But I've found things like if I use my MPC, like sometimes I'll use it for sound design more than anything now. And if you're time stretching a sample in the MPC, it really takes a long period of time, and you can. I've stretched a drum loop on my MPC that literally took 8 hours. And you know, that same sample I could time stretch in Machine in like, you know, a half a second. You know, I mean, looking back on the time that things took, you know, and like I still have reel-to-reel tape machines in my studio that I use. But and the machine has the MPC 60 mode. It's got the SP 1200 modes. You know, the
but
Renaissance
I
has.
don't like them. They don't sound like the real thing. They sound
I
just.
would argue
Really close.
I would argue that point a lot because I've actually done blind testing with an MPC 60 and an SP 1200 and an EPS 12 and a few other machines when the vintage emulations first came. And I gotta say, they sound really close, especially when you use them right. Like if you sample a 33 RPM, 33 and a third at 45 RPM, and you know, and then pitch it up, and then you bring it back down, it breaks apart in a very similar way. I mean, I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, exactly.
But as far as well, I guess I should say the question in the chat room was, is there anything today that is capturing the vintage sounds of old hardware? And to me, it's really the workflow was a big part of the sound. Like to me, like a lot of the whole, you know, a lot of people scream about MPC swing, and a lot of people scream about you know, that vintage crackle and this and that, and I think a lot of that had to do with the actual workflow. I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the MPC swing was less about the MPC swing and more about the programmer using it. You look at a lot of these older beats, and a lot of them were either not very quantized, you know, where they would maybe quantize only certain parts of the beat and then leave the rest up and maybe use just a little bit of swing. Like I've used the MPC swing for a long, long time, and while I like it, to me it comes way more down to how I'm actually programming the beat as opposed to am I quantizing everything and then shifting it with the swing function. Like to me, it's way less about that, and it's way less about the actual sound quality of the sampler itself either. Like for instance, my favorite sound from a sampler was the EMU sound. Like I love the old EPS sound, and I love the old ASRX sound. Like it has like a slight roundness to it, and the way it breaks apart is really interesting. I love it, but I can emulate it faster than I can save that. Faster than I can sample into the old machine. You know, get that sound and then save it and export it into my DAW or whatever. I can emulate that exact same sound to the point where it's so close that a blind comparison you might be able to tell a slight difference. But is it enough in the context of an actual song after mastering is performed to actually be able to hear it? Not at all. Not even close. Like at that point, it becomes all about
semantics.
Yeah, and it's really about that whole, you know, like, you know, oh, it's so cool that I used vintage MPC 60 on this, or, you know, it's so cool that I did this or that, and it's like, realistically, the end user, the end listener doesn't know anything about it. The end, you know, I mean, half the people, like Mike was saying, half the people who listen to those old Wu-Tang tracks when he said program fat bass lines on Novation had no clue what he was talking about. You know what I mean? So it's like the user didn't care. So realistically, it's about, you know, are you getting the sound that you want? Not are you emulating a sound that you think that you want, but are you actually getting the sound that you want?
And
You
I
know.
think that's a good point too, Ken, because I mean there's a lot of different things that also go into that old sound. I think a lot of it had to do with the tape, vinyl, because nobody really samples. Well, most people aren't sampling vinyl anymore, but also cut what you call it, recording to tape. I know you do. I still
But of course, I got
still have
pretzels
some
on top of
I
my
have a
turntables right
turntable.
now.
I have
So
my turntable here. I still have a box of 45s. It's just
my
I'm saying
turntables are
the
covered
vast
right now.
majority
So
of people
I agree.
aren't sampling vinyl anymore. That's what I was getting at.
No,
I
I
think
agree.
that
I
that
agree.
has a lot to do with it. Um, Also, like you said, the way people are doing. I was going to make another point, and I forgot the point I was going to make. Um, it's just
Also, there's
like
a
you said,
whole
the end
generation
listener
of people
doesn't
coming up
care.
without them.
Like if you listen to say Will John's drums, he uses the Dr. Dre's drums. They're both using MPC 3000, completely
Well,
different sound.
on top of that, I kind of laugh a bit when people say, "Oh, well, I bought XYZ producer drum kit," when those of us who are in the trade know for a fact that like these XYZ producers are getting their drum kits from other guys and other engineers. Like
Hmm.
I know personally there's certain people that sit in on sessions and assist with these kinds of things. There's somebody behind somebody, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Assisting with that kind of stuff. So it's like, to me, I never once was the kind of guy who wanted to buy equipment just based on other producers. Now,
Right.
there, the flip side of that is also that, like, whereas to me, like the first hip hop group that got me, like, I gotta get into hip hop, like, I love hip hop, was BDP, right? So, and with BDP, KRS-One, it was Said G making the beats, Um, I'm talking, this is for the majority of the stuff. So Said G was behind the scenes, and at that time, not even getting producer credits for that kind of stuff. But like, you look at Said G, and then RZA came along and blew my mind as well. And this is like the early parts of their careers, who he had Prince Paul helping him. So for us, we have these classics that are, in my mind, a good hip hop drum. That's kind of like the start, and then things evolve from there. But
Exactly.
a lot of, and I use the term kids loosely, but I just mean young people who are enthusiastically making music, that are coming up these days. That's not necessarily as classic to them as they might be coming up listening to Danny Brown and be like, oh well, Danny Brown, this is what I'm coming up on. You know what I mean? Like, there's multiple generations past what we call the true school hip hop,
Right.
and the early '90s era of hip hop. You know,
Hmm.
that was a section of hip hop, and now it's moving on. And the cats that are listening to like Action Bronson and Danny Brown and
Joey
Odd
Badass.
Future and all this other stuff, a lot of the producers that are making those beats, FL Studio is like their classic. You know what I mean?
Exactly. FL
Whether
Studio is the
whether
new
people
MPC
crapped on
60.
early versions of FL Studio or not doesn't matter. That's what these cats are using. Like
FL Studio
Sap,
is the new
who
MPC
produces
60. I'm
for
telling you.
Game and them, that's what he was using. You know what I mean? Like, and Ninth Wonder even. You know what I mean? Like early Ninth Wonder stuff. And it's like you're looking at these classics, and um, yeah. And I see Tone posted Ninth Wonder right as I said it, but yeah, like these cats are using stuff that the older school heads would just dismiss. Oh, this is trash. This is
Hmm.
this is low grade software. Blah blah blah. But at the same time, the cats before the early hip hop heads, who, let's face it, were disco and funk guys, right? Laughing at the hip hop guys, like, oh, you're using a 12-bit sampler to try to recreate our awesome drum kits in these studios. We're laughing at them. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it's like to try to force the opinion that hardware sound is so much better. I think a
It's
lot of
not.
it becomes like this myth, this legend. You know what I mean? Where
Hmm.
realistically, what matters and is more important is what is the sound that you're really trying to achieve. Because if you're
So,
trying to sound like, if you're a younger cat and you're trying to sound like you know somebody that came out in the 2000s or late 2000s,
hmm.
then chances are, until they got a major deal, they really weren't using too much boutique equipment. You know what I mean? They
Hmm.
were using some really crappy gear. Like I know big name artists that were using Gemini turntables, and you know what I mean. And trust me, I've scratched on Gemini turntables. They are not fun to scratch on. You know.
It's funny you bring up the sound thing too, because we talk about, and especially when it comes to sampling, and you see this argument all the time, MP3 versus vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the same thing. You know, I'm not. My preference is vinyl because there's just too many MP3s out there, and there are so many songs that you can't find in MP3 format. You can find the popular stuff, and you can find a lot of stuff that is not as popular. There's some obscure stuff you can even find on
It's so
MP3.
funny because I have the exact opposite opinion in a way, and I'm a
What do
big
you mean?
vinyl head. Like I love record digging. Like
Me
anybody
too.
who
I'm
knows
not
that
biased one way or the other.
yeah, I record dig like there's no tomorrow. Like I prefer to buy like 200 records at a time. Like I've been clearing out records for the past few months, but that's not why I love vinyl so much. I mean, that's part of it. Like I like the actual dig aspect and the community of it. But the thing about it is that with the new age of sampling is like I love the fact that when I grab a record, I can physically see the grooves in the record. I know exactly, like, okay, if I drop the needle here, I'm likely to find a really interesting break because these grooves look a certain way compared to the rest of the grooves on the record. So there's like this tactile feeling of it that I very, very much, and I like the sound of it too. But there's a flip side of that, and that is YouTube sampling and found sound sampling throughout the internet that I love. The sound quality is trash, but that doesn't freaking matter. What I love about it is like, oh, you just go onto YouTube and look for street performer, and then just find all these amazing sounds. You know what I mean? Like these just, I mean, this stuff would never end up on vinyl. You know? You're finding guys on hang drums that are just going nuts, and you're finding, you know, kids playing buckets and, you know, just all kinds of weird rhythms that you would have never gotten. And to me, I love finding stuff like that. To me, sampling stuff like that you would have never found on vinyl. There's far more things that are in MP3 form that used to be on vinyl than you know, things that are on YouTube and the cell phone revolution that you will never find on vinyl.
Exactly.
You know?
And it, like I think I posted a video like that a month ago where somebody was just doing these amazing drum rhythms on ice, just these big blocks of ice, like they were in Alaska.
Absolutely.
And that was crazy to me.
Yeah, I still kind of like the miking setup. I feel like, I mean, I saw some of the mic setups, but I'm like, I'm like flabbergasted by how good that was. And Rich, if you can find that, I see Richard London in the chat room, who's also an excellent sound designer.
Yeah, he is very good.
Yeah, he's looking for it now. It would be great to post that in the chat room because that's an excellent example. For instance, like I'm one of those guys who I love putting vocal snippets throughout beats. So like when I'm producing hip-hop beats for fun, I just like putting emotion into beats by using vocal snippets. And I found this girl who's from some Eastern European country, and Eastern European girls have just the coolest accents. I love it. Like something about it, it's just very interesting to me. And she was really depressed, and she was just talking about you know, how depressed she was. So I made a YouTube video where I actually made the beat, and I was using her voice. I would have never gotten a record quite like that. You know what I mean? Like I've got some amazing spoken word records on vinyl, but like something like that was that personal to where this girl was literally in her room just crying and, you know, letting out all this emotion. That would have never been possible 15 years ago. You would have never seen it anywhere, you know? And to me, it's like, if you don't accept that and embrace that as a sampler artist, then you're completely missing the whole entire point of sampling. You're missing what is so great about repurposing content that is already produced, you know? Like, I'm sure we've all seen, I don't necessarily want to pick on older people, but just people who don't understand sampling. You know, they don't understand the artistic aspect of sampling. And they'll say, oh, well, you took this James Brown break. You're not really a musician, you know? And like when I see that kind of stuff, it's like I laugh because I'm like, okay, well, it's, you know, you obviously just don't really care about the fact that a piano is nothing more than a machine that strikes a string. You know what I mean? Like, that's all that we're doing is we're striking a string and manipulating it differently. You know what I mean? It's a different sound, it's a different mentality, but the same aspect is there, trying to coax the sound that you want out of something else. You know. So when I see like these YouTube videos and you can just grab sounds that would have never, and not only that, but also the fact the evolution of samplers now. Look at the Octatrack. Look at reactor and granular sampling now. You know, this stuff was never possible previously, to where you could slice a sample into, you know, milliseconds and use that for synthesis. You know, that's a whole, like, that's a whole nother range to go to. You know.
Hey, Recycle could do that. Recycle was doing that in, I think, '97, and you could transfer that to your hardware sampler.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, that's very similar to like Music Concrete, like, and like a lot of the French artists in the early like '60s and late '50s that were, you know, and '70s too, that were like taking tape machines and splicing them together and you know, doing all kinds of weird things like that. I mean, the avant-garde aspect that used to be so extremely niche is now kind of becoming much more accepted and more commonplace. Also, the fact that now MTV doesn't matter anymore. Like, let's be realistic. Like, now it's about like what, like Pandora, YouTube, Stitcher, and you know, like these streaming apps, things like that. Like, it used to be, people were finding out about music through very narrow methods, and now you can have the most oddball mentality as far as what you want music to be, and you're going to be able to find it. Whereas before, you might not have been able to do that. Like, we were having instances where bands like Jane's Addiction or Primus would come out, and people would, you know, be like, oh, this is some amazing new sound that I never heard before. This is so weird. Now, a band that's totally out there and weird, that it was rare for MTV to give play to, you don't have to worry about MTV giving play to, because now it's out there and you can find it on your own. You know what I mean? You can look up experimental music on Google and just find, you know, page after page of band camps that are set up from, you know, artists that are just, you know, pushing the boundaries of what's considered music, you know?
And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. And that goes back to what we were talking about, too, about the industry, too. Now with the internet and the power of everything, if you have the work ethic and the passion about it, you can really build your own musical empire. It's like, you look at somebody and say, I'll use Rebecca Black, for example. Yeah, she released that horrible Friday song. But she's coming back, and I heard another song by her recently. It's not a bad song. It's like, you can hear this girl actually can sing when, you know, when she's.
I think good and bad is the most subjective term in the world. Because what I might consider bad, another, like, you know, like I listen to something that is produced. I mean, let's just talk on a production aspect. Something that's produced extremely well, like a Justin Bieber record. You know, they're using top engineers. You know, I've met the guy who makes the guitar amps for his guitarist. You know, and they're extremely boutique. Like, everything is boutique, like top level stuff. But philosophically,
we don't like the music.
And music wise, to me, it's completely uninteresting and trash. And that's not to say that, you know, these people aren't putting in amazing work on these things, but to me, it's trash. Whereas to a 12-year-old girl, you know, not to completely pigeonhole all his fans, but I'm speaking to majority aspects, might find it to be the most beautiful song in the world, you know, when they're hearing this kid sing and whatnot. So good versus bad, it's like, really, that stuff really has to kind of go out the window in a way, and you have to start saying to yourself, you know, what's viable versus not viable. Like, does something work or does it not work? Some people, for instance, like a classically trained pianist, might really not like certain dissonant sounds, right? And because they just don't work for him. Whereas, you know, someone who grows up without that same knowledge, but grows up on somebody like RZA and hears like all these really off-note, like dissonant sounds, finds the beauty in the ugly. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So on a and to that same point, on a production point, you could say Bieber's stuff is technically superior to an original Wu-Tang record, right?
Right.
Because they were recorded in a shitty home studio. You know, he had all kinds of, you know, gear that by today's standards is junk, and
people
you know,
still sought after that gear.
And he would produce these things that to me is like some of the most beautiful sound I've ever heard in my life. You know what I mean?
I think
like
most people would agree with that.
When I hear you know, Liquid Swords, like to me it's like it's mind-blowingly good, you know? And but at the same time, on a technical standpoint, when I listen to a very well produced Disney record, you know, I'm like, it makes me nauseous. You know what I mean? Like if I listen to like an NSYNC album, for instance, you know, I'm like, it doesn't speak to me. The emotion feels wrong. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like to me, it like in the same, but that's the same feeling that someone who technically might say this dissonance feels wrong. Well,
it's the same guys that say rap is crap kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's just that, you know, it's different strokes for different folks. You know what I mean? And to me, it's like I've learned that as much as I can dislike certain things, there is no such thing as bad. There is no such thing as good. There is only music, and from there, you have to just be accepting. You have to be accepting of other people's opinions. You know?
Exactly.
Sometimes
that's a gem. That's a gem that took me a long time to learn about.
Hold on, what's
sorry,
that,
Mike? I
Mike?
didn't mean to cut you off.
What I think is the quality. For example, let's take that Wu-Tang and Justin Bieber comparison. The quality is supporting the message and the flavor of the artist. Think about Wu-Tang had such a clean sound as Justin Bieber. There would be no flavor on this album, and it wouldn't be so
great. And I totally agree. Totally agree. In fact, I would argue that a lot of the later Wu-Tang stuff I really don't like a lot because it's too clean. You're absolutely right. Like Ghostface kept a lot of his stuff dirty, and his stuff, and I feel like that's part of the reason why Ghostface continued to do so much better than a lot of the other Wu-Tang artists, because his beat selection and a lot of the vocal things that he would do would still sound a little bit dirty. But when you take away that dirty aspect from it's like blues. Like when you listen to really, really good blues, there's a saturation to the sound that harmonically is a little bit on edge that makes real blues sound right to your ear. And if blues is done in Carnegie Hall and with, you know, perfect mics and perfect mixing, it just doesn't sound right. It just doesn't. You know what I mean? Like give me, like, for instance, let me just say this is kind of corny that I would take it here, but let me just say, for instance, if you see the movie Black Snake Moan, right? And Samuel L. Jackson is playing, you know, he's got this Delta blues sound, right? Like, and he's in the club and it's sweaty and it's gritty. That's what I want the records of blues to sound like in my head. I want to have that same kind of imagery. You know what I mean? Like I want this grittiness. You know what I mean? Like I want this rawness. And if you take that away from the recording by making the recording too good, you know what I mean? It's just it falls apart to me. Like it loses emotion.
Yeah. Or for example, these old gospel stuff that were recorded back in the 20s, 30s. If the songs are so sad, they need to have this bad quality to transport the whole message. You know, when they would have, like, modern gospel is like, well, it's boring. It's not transporting the same emotions than the old stuff.
And Richard is saying in the chat room, I've heard blues played in clubs with great sound, and it's awesome. That's different. When you're talking about a live scenario of actually being there. Okay. Now, of course, you want good sound in the club. Okay, and that's obvious. But in translating it to record, you don't want it to sound like you're in a studio, trying to, you know, have a lab coat on while you're making blues, because lab coats and blues don't mix. You know what I mean? Unless you're like Tom Waits,
like
and you're some kind of some science and magic guy like Tom Waits. Like, it's, for the most part, I mean, there's always going to be exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, I mean, it's just like no, like you want that, like in a way, like we were talking about how, you know, hardware versus software, this kind of thing. In a way, there's certain things that really lend themselves to tape, like to mastering to tape. Like for instance, when I hear something mixed to tape and you can hear that tape saturation on it, certain types of music tend to lend themselves better to that. Pop music, really as a whole, I'm not really looking for that because the dynamics kind of speak to a more digital CD-esque area where, for instance, if you mastered to vinyl and you had the same dynamics that something like a really big dance record that was mastered to digital had, the needle would jump right out of the record. Like it physically wouldn't be able to handle it. You know what I mean? So, but to me, it's like certain styles of music kind of lend themselves to certain mediums of sound, you know?
Right, like I wouldn't imagine trying to produce a modern, say, Britney Spears record on an SP1200. It's too dirty.
Yeah,
exactly. You know, which I will say to her credit, because I'm not a big fan of pop music as a whole, but Christina Aguilera and the record she did with DJ Premier was impressive. It was really, really impressive, and it kind of it really didn't even surprise me that much because I actually remember when her first record came out, I was working in a record store at the time, like a little mom and pop vinyl record store at the time, and I remember when she first came out, she had a very, like, I'm talking Genie in a Bottle, like, and it was actually before Genie in a Bottle really hit. It was like her, it was like they were sending out promo singles of her, and it was very raw stuff. Like it was actually really surprisingly raw.
Yeah,
it sounded like an old soul singer.
You hear it. You hear it on her second album. Now, I am a pop music fan. I love Christina. I like Britney. You know, I'm not ashamed to say that. And
you shouldn't
hear that on her second album. You hear it on her third album. Actually, the third album was the one she did with Premiere, I believe. That's where you really hear it. You know, I think the first album was, you know, her producer saying, "Okay, you know, Britney's hot, and you should do what she's doing."
Yeah, and I found
right now.
That's another thing that, you know, as far as like the whole good versus bad thing is, like I found myself as I got older, I started understanding, like, because I used to, like, I grew up in a household that was very not with the norm as far as like none of my family members ever liked anything that was like top 40, like that kind of stuff was like never played in my household. Like it was always like really obscure stuff in my house. But I kind of grew up with this distaste for anything mass marketed. Like I grew up with a distaste for I don't like McDonald's, I don't like Walmart, like, you know, as a whole, you know what I mean? And it's not even about like, oh, how they treat their employees and this and that. That stuff might be bad and all, but to me it was like I just never liked mass marketed anything. It always felt disingenuous and I just didn't like it. And as I'm getting older, I'm starting to find the same artists that when I was younger, I had this huge distaste for. Nowadays, I can actually appreciate because I'm relaxing on these things. I'm realizing that not everybody is the same, and not everybody, you know what I mean? Like there's different aspects of, like for instance, Justin Timberlake. When I was growing up, I was like disgusted by it. Like I couldn't even think to listen to a Justin Timberlake song. But now, like, I can go back and I can say, you know what? If you really listen to Justin Timberlake, he's a damn good artist. Like honestly, like his songs are good. Like I like, you know, and whereas before, and it's funny because like to me it wouldn't be mass market because growing up in the '90s or whatever, you know, not many kids around me were into, you know, Stevie Wonder. You know what I mean? Like not many kids around me were into that. So he might have been mass market at the time that he was first coming out, but I was really into that kind of stuff. And now I can look back at like Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson and stuff and say, oh, this is really good. And Justin Timberlake is really good too in that same way. Like if you listen to some of his stuff, it's like he's very Michael Jackson-esque, you know, and a lot of people be like, oh, that's blasphemy, blah, blah, blah. No, like a lot of his music is very Jackson-esque, and I love me some good Michael Jackson. Give me Off the Wall any day of the week, you know?
Michael Jackson was amazing. And I think also going back to, you know, the generations, I think the late 90s was really the end of that point where, you know, musicians just made music that they thought was good. You started to get into the 2000s, really when you started to see, the Backstreet Boys, the NSYNCs, Britneys, and all that, and they were all kind of making the same record over and over again,
Hmm.
and copying each other. And I think that's where you really saw an end of an era. Now it's, oh, well, and I remember producing for people, and you guys might have seen this too, where okay, I have to have the party record, and I have to have the record, that the girls
Yeah,
are going to
yeah.
like, and I have to have the record that, the guys are going to like, and all this. And there's too much of that going on right now. There's been too much of that going on in music. Well, now everybody, I think about everybody now is just producing singles.
Yeah, for a long time. For a long time, there was a lot of that, and that's something that and I would expect Client Cypher would agree with this, judging by his musical taste. But I've always been a fan of like concept albums. Like I like concept albums, but the issue with concept albums is in order to listen to them, you got to listen to the entire album. You got to listen to like 10 to 15 songs, and all the way through to really get them. 36 Chambers to me is a concept album. Because it's all enveloped in one thing. You listen to like Pink Floyd's The Wall or Dark Side of the Moon. You listen to Deltron 3030, Dr. Octagon, Prince Paul's Prince Among Thieves. Things like that. Like I love, Supreme Clientele. Like I love these.
Great example.
I love these concept albums, but to me, it's like these days, it's much harder to come by because everything is predicated on not just singles, but how you look at like Bandcamp or something like that, and they give you these stats as far as how much is someone listening to a song, or you look at YouTube, how long has someone watched this video, and like average span is like maybe 3 minutes tops. You know what I mean? Like they're not listening or watching things for very long periods of times, and it makes you wonder, like, should you be going for the long term? Should you be going for this large thing? Is it a problem of ADD culture? Is it a problem of short attention spans, or is it something else? Like what exactly is it? And to me, like I really like Dr. Octagon was one of the turning points in my life, honestly. Like when I heard Dr. Octagon, same with The Wall. Like when I heard these albums, like it shook me to my core because I was like, this is what music can do to you. Like this is what these things can do, because they can take you on such a journey and be so original, whereas a single can be really great and you can listen to it 150 times over and over and over again, and just love it to death. But it's not going to take you on quite the same journey that an entire 20, 30 minute, 60-minute experience is going to take you on.
Right, I agree with you. I totally agree with that.
Mike, what would you say? Coming up in Germany, like what would you say was an album aside from 36 Chambers? What would you say was like an album that made you really take notice of the music and make you want to create it?
You probably never heard of it, but there's a French crew called Cyan Super Crew, and they're a little similar to Wu-Tang because it's a large group of members, and what I really loved about their sound is they're perfectly in sync, meaning
kind of like Jurassic 5.
What?
Kind of like Jurassic 5. Or like Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5, like where they would.
I shoot you guys a link into the chat real quick, but
okay, yeah, do that.
Actually they're about like 9 or 10 people, and they're backing each other up and or doubling, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
They were perfectly in sync on the record and also live. And this really influenced the things, not on the side how I do beats, but how I do produce rappers or artists. When I have people here, and at the beginning it was like if the doubles are not perfectly in sync, I was saying, yeah, okay, it's fine, I'll move it later. But when I heard this album and I heard how good it can sound when you do it just right, I was really watching out this while recording that people are in sync and there's no much editing after the recording. So that was one point that really influenced the way I'm working.
As a producer, do you find yourself struggling with rappers who don't practice enough?
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely. If somebody comes here and he has the lyrics written on the paper and needs to read from it, I send him home.
Yep. I'm the same way unless we are writing the track in the studio, and the only people that I allow to write tracks in the studio are people that are directly involved with me, or like people that I've come up with, or people that I'm trying to work with in a long-term scenario or be a part of the actual concept. But yeah, when I see a rapper who comes into my studio, and you know, especially if they have a big ego. Like if they come in with an ego and
yeah.
they don't have everything memorized, and not only I don't just want them to have it memorized. I want them to have it memorized in like 2 or 3 different cadences. You know what I mean? I want them to be able to like, really play with the words, And if you can't, and if you don't know how to do overdubs, then you need to practice. And I find that is such a big problem these days, is like a lot of these rappers don't practice.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the good ones do, like, but I find the younger ones that I've worked with, they don't realize how much money they're going to waste if they come into the studio unprepared. And I'm like,
Well,
look, dude,
not
I
only
don't have
that,
time to waste, and you don't have money to waste. You know what I mean?
well, not only that, it's a level of professionalism. How, if this is something you say you want to take as a career, how seriously are you taking it? Like, why aren't you excited to get this record done? Like,
Yeah.
you should have had this record memorized forwards and backwards, especially if we sent you the music. The only
Mm.
thing we have to do is record you written to the music.
Do you guys send out beats via email or anything like that, or how do you
I
handle
don't
that?
really
'Cause
focus
I
on
don't
beat
do
sales
it.
anymore. I don't focus too much on beat sales anymore and working with artists anymore because, like we were talking about with the egos, or even worse, like I try, doing stuff over the internet, and I find more and more rappers just want a handout. And it's like, man, if I'm going to do that, to not only get, not make much money off of this song, to of course get my name cut out of the credits and everything, I might as well just produce electronic music and be the artist myself.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
personally like I found that, I mean, I try not to do too many records anymore these days because I'm so busy with other projects. But when I do them, I find that if if the person isn't fully ready, or is kind of just bullshitting and taking too long to do something, then they're out. Like that's it. Like I just don't. I don't spend another second thinking about it. Like I just move on, because I don't have time for that kind of stuff. And on top of that, a lot of people want to say, oh, well, I'll buy this beat or I'll buy that beat, and can you send it over email? No, I don't do it. Like, to me, it's not worth it. Like, it's not even worth sending things through email anymore because of work ethic and other problems as well. Like, I really don't like it when I get mixes back from artists who have other people record and mix, then they send it to me expecting me to fix it, and I'm like,
No,
this
I'm
is
not
what you
fixing it.
did? Like,
I'm not doing
really?
this too. No.
Is it-
Yeah, Kev, go ahead.
And that comes kind of with this internet mentality too, the do-it-yourself mentality, where I've actually been grateful, or I've been well, not grateful. I've been lucky because most of the artists that I've dealt with, especially online, because most of the rappers that I've dealt with locally don't want to pay for nothing. But when I deal with the internet, most of them just want the beat and then they're gonna go do their thing. You probably won't even hear the song again. And that, like, I've tried to find artists to work with, and I was lucky enough a couple years ago with Killer Tracks to do I Hate mixtapes, and where we were both largely involved with that. But you don't get that much anymore. You get people like, okay, give me some beats, I'm gonna go do my thing, catch you later, it's my song, I don't want to hear from you ever again.
Yeah, exactly.
So I try not to worry so much, about how I try to, get them something that's good from my endpoint, knowing that even if I ask to hear the song, there's a great chance that I won't. Like I've worked with a lot of artists. I've worked with some international artists, and less than 10 of them have actually sent me back something, or have said, hey, I'm putting this out there. Not very many. Most of them don't want to build those relationships. So, I mean, as much, especially now since we're so oversaturated, it is a numbers game. I try not to worry about it. It's like, I'm not going to send you a beat so you can write to it. You can pay me and do your thing.
So, let me ask you something. What is the most recent thing that you've bought for your studio? Both of you.
Omnisphere.
Omnisphere? How about you?
Actually, no. I bought a white marker board to keep up with what I'm working on.
Nice. Yes. You know what? I got two of them.
Got it from Dollar Tree. It's amazing.
Seriously, that's a major part of the studio is organization as a whole.
Exactly. Other than that, the last actual piece of gear I think was Omnisphere.
Nice. How about you?
I bought a lot of stuff in the last 2 months.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Was it Black Friday or?
Black Friday, Christmas deals. I bought Machine Studio. I bought the Complete 9 Ultimate update. IK Total Studio or IK Multimedia Total Studio Free, whatever it's called. I bought new racks for my sound card because it's in rack format, and I got some old Proverb right here. A lot of stuff going on, and it was just kind of. But I have to say, I'm kind of like a gear slut. I want to test everything, but it doesn't mean I keep it for a long time. So
that's a big one.
Are you reselling, or are you returning, or what are you doing?
No, I'm selling them. When I'm done with it, I'm selling it. I really don't. I can't understand if people are some kind of collecting their stuff, but for me, it really is like a tool. When I don't need the tool anymore, I sell it and get another tool. When people come here over to my studio, they're always like, oh wow, this is new and this is new, and wow, why is this gone and this is gone? It's, I'm always, I want stuff really quick, but I also want to get rid of it really quick sometimes.
Yeah, I'm kind of like I like to save things because I never know when I want to go back to them, and I'm a bit of a hoarder. But I've been working on it. I've gotten rid of over 6,000 pieces of vinyl in the past month or so. So
the fact that you had 6,000 pieces of vinyl says a lot. And I'm kind of somewhere in between the both.
Over 20,000.
Oh my God. I thought my collection was big. The biggest I got was 1,500, and I sold them off in 2012.
Yeah, I don't know. I find I'm also see, I don't like the term gear slut at all. I like the term gear escort because I like to get paid. I like to get paid for being pimped out.
But Mike brought up a good point too, and I talk to a lot of people too, especially because I do so many reviews. What I have and what I use and what I keep are different. I review a lot of stuff, but and it might be good, but if it doesn't fit that workflow, it doesn't fit what I use, then I might delete it off my hard drive, or I might not even use it much. Like I have so many different plugins from doing these plugin reviews and spending some time with and all this, and realistically, these days I'm using Alchemy a little more. Well, it's because I got that for review when I did the review. I using a lot of Omnisphere right now. I'm using, of course, a lot of Machine and a lot of Contact.
Is there any plugin that you have that you thought you would like a lot and you just don't?
Lots of.
Session Drummer 2.
Oh, really?
Cakewalk. Yeah, it's the one they include in Sonar. But it's an older one. I'm like, because I really like acoustic drums. Like I thought I'd love this. I don't care for it. Trying to think of something else. There was another one I'm thinking of that I can't think of. It's another acoustic drum library. It's not BFD. It's not Addictive Drums. I love those guys. The one that comes with Complete, the Studio Drummer. I don't really care for that. I don't think it's bad. It's just it's not as flexible as I want it to be, especially coming from Addictive Drums, which I think is just the most flexible drum library out there.
Hmm.
Coming from that and then getting studio drummer, I'm kind of like, yeah.
When you guys are making your beats, are you mostly programming your own drum lines, or are you using something like that where it has patterns already in it, or what are you doing?
Oh, I program them. I just use those sounds because sometimes, like, if I want a sound of, like, say, a '70s record or like a soul record or something, I'm turning those loops off and I'm programming them myself still.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'll use the loops, like I've used the loops sometimes, but no, for the most part, I'm programming.
Hmm.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too. I'm programming, and what I do a lot is I use Melodyne and grab some old, really groovy drum loops,
hmm.
um, load them in Melodyne, and then reassign some contact drums or something in it and tweak it from there, which is
Hmm.
kind of
Sure.
interesting because you have a lot of flexibility, especially for drum breaks. This is great because you have all this, especially when it comes to velocity levels. It's really
Yeah.
hard to program these or play them with the pads. But if you have a loop with really nice different velocity levels and you load it into Melodyne, it keeps those levels, and you just reassign a new MIDI kit, and it sounds really awesome.
Now, what about breaks? Are you guys still using a lot of break beats? Like
Well,
I went through a phase where I was using break beats for everything. Yeah.
it depends on what I'm doing. Like, because I have different styles where I'll produce for an artist, I'll produce for me, which is just for fun. I'll produce for a product, or I'll produce for something that is going to be out there, that could possibly be monetized in some way. And those things all kind of dictate on exactly what I'm going to do, because if I'm going to be monetizing something, I'm very careful about what is sampled, what is not sampled. If something is sampled, who owns the copyright to it, and how that copyright is going to affect me in the long term. Um, and I mean, but if I'm producing like for an artist, right? I'm less worried so much about okay, well, I don't have the copyright for this, whatever. Because realistically, unless that artist is already large name artist, it's really not going to matter, because if he gets to the point to where he would get sued, well then he made the come up already. You know what I mean? Like, that's good enough. And then it's like, well, you can take the loss because you got the fame out of it. Look at Danger Mouse.
Exactly.
Um,
And you brought up a good point too about who owns the rights, because that's actually what made me sell my record collection. Is I didn't want to have to keep up with, okay, he owns the rights, or she owns the rights, and do all that. And that's actually what got me into more VSTs too, because I was like, let me find a way to recreate the sounds that I was getting from vinyl
Yeah, yeah,
in
I
the
do a lot
box.
of that. Yeah, and when I'm making music just to make it sound good, though, I love taking old drum breaks and
Oh yeah.
layering it underneath of drums that I'm finger drumming. Like, I
Hmm.
love just, you know what I mean? Because you get these interesting syncopations happening. Like, and a lot of the times, like, the drums can be so low that they can either A, be taken out and not affect it, or B, be left in and it's altered so much that, dude, they better have a damn good algorithm if they're going to catch me on that. You know what I mean? Like,
That's actually one of the things I love about addictive drums, 'cause especially with the 80 packs and expansions you get for them, you can probably replace breakbeats with it and maybe use like some
yeah,
simulated vinyl hiss,
a
and you
lot.
will get really close.
You know what though? Emulated vinyl hiss. I mean, and there's lots of really interesting techniques of using ducking to kind of get like really close to how actual vinyl is. But to me, like,
It still sounds fake.
it sounds a little fake, but at the same time, like, vinyl hiss is not like it's not it's not that I love it or that I hate it. It's that it's one of those semantics things
Mhm.
that to me, the only point to having it, more than just making the track dirty, is that, like, I know that my version of Skull Snaps is going to sound different than anybody else's version, because I've got this little piece of grit that hits right before this hi-hat, and it makes the groove sound just a little bit different. And, like, to me, I love that. Like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I like
It's
the
character.
I like dirty records as much as I love clean records. Like, clean records are great for what when you need them. But I've got about 100 versions of different, like, Buddy Miles records that are, like, so scratched up. but I'm like, yeah, but the kick on this one sounds cooler than the kick on this one, and like, you know what I mean, just because of the different types of breaks in them, you know what I mean, and the different types of
Let me
scratch.
throw in something in here. Sorry for the interrupt you, but on the topics list, there's a point, I think Kev added it. It says third-party machine developers, they don't get enough love. And that's especially, I want to say something to the copyright thing here.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of machine libraries sold online that have not cleared the rights. There's some machine tutorial thing, and that's why I think they don't get enough love.
I don't think that's. What do you mean by get enough love? Define that a little bit.
Because I don't condone that stuff. Like, if you're going to...
Hold on. Let him define get enough love first, and then I'll expand on that.
Yeah, Kev, what's your point?
Oh, no, go ahead. I was saying that, yeah, like, if you're going to sell a product but then not clear it as a commercial product, then, you know, especially if you're selling these loops as is, it's not like a piece of a song or a piece of a composition.
Mm-hmm.
Then how much love do they really need? Like, do you really deserve love for selling synthetic substitution as your part of your sound collection? Or if synthetic substitution is part of your beat, if it's part of your song, and it's just an element, that's something totally different.
I can tell you that I've talked to some other sound designers, and I say that in air quotes, who I know for a fact are not only taking something like breaks, from vinyl or whatever that they don't own the copyright and are selling them, but are taking other people's sound designed drums and sounds from other packs from previous years or whatever, maybe adding a little bit, if even adding reverb. Sometimes they don't even do that, they just put them out. And these guys are just reselling other people's hard work, maybe with a slight tweak to it, and then calling it their own, and pretending like they own a copyright. It's a real black eye on where I think sound design as a whole is going. Because it used to, there was a small subset of things like that were happening, but people knew what they were. When Ultimate Breakbeats and stuff like that was coming out on vinyl, people knew that they didn't own but it also wasn't being utilized in the same way. Now you get certain companies that are putting out sound packs that are clearly not their own sounds, that are clearly not things that they are actually creating, and it's really, really ugly because, one, a lot of the times those guys are selling stuff for extremely cheap. They'll do like 5,000 sounds and they'll sell it for like $20. Well, the reason they can do that is because they didn't spend the months that it takes to properly create those sounds. They just took somebody else's sounds, packed them all together, and sold them as their own.
That happens a lot with massive and silence packs too. Like somebody will take something from their packs and put it in their own pack. Like, okay, well, these are my favorite packs. Like, say, there's a popular SoundClick producer who did this a few years ago. I'm not going to throw his name out there, but I would hear his packs from actual commercial packs, and you would eventually hear, they're just taking bits and pieces of other packs that they just really liked and saying, this is my pack. Because
for instance, my expansion packs, while I would love to come out with them far more often than I do and have them be larger even than they are, and I fight hard to keep my prices down and all, the fact of the matter is that I do spend a lot of time working on them, and they are all from scratch. Like, my sounds come from, like, they are mine. Like, there's no possible way that anybody could ever dispute what my sounds are. They don't come from anybody else. And I've talked to these other producers that, like, I think it's more common than people understand, because I've had conversations with other producers, I again in air quotes, that have spoken to me in a really, like, kind of matter-of-fact way about how they've stolen other people's sounds. And then when I respond to them like, you're a douchebag, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm, like, angry about it. They look at me like like, oh wait, you're not doing it. Please, everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it. No, you have terrible morals, and you should probably be hit by a car. I just don't. To me, it's very hard for me to say, okay, well, third-party companies aren't getting enough love. I would say that I fully understand why certain people would shy away from using third-party expansions and want to only use reputable companies.
Right.
And when I say reputable, let me
Big
change
companies.
that.
Companies
I
with
would
a
say
name to it.
companies that have a long track history and whatever. But I've also, I mean, I've heard rumors at least of other long track record companies rehashing things as well, which is pretty scary. But when I hold on, I gotta mute Mr.
Yeah, I've been
Mark.
muting the people that
Okay.
have been coming in,
So
and it's just to make it easier on the
one
chat.
thing that I would say is like if you're a consumer who's buying these expansion packs, try to take a look into who these people are. Maybe try to understand a little bit about if, for instance, if the cover artwork is using lots of obviously not owned trademarks, they probably are stealing sounds. If they're stealing logos and stealing images from video games and images from other box art and things like that darn well XYZ person can't afford, this imagery to be putting on his box art, or if he did, it would take out a lot of his profit, so he wouldn't use it anyway. Think about that a little bit and say, okay, are these sounds that I really want to trust in my production and to not get sued over? You know what I mean? Because if you're using those sounds and you can't prove that you actually own those sounds, and the person who does own those sounds, especially if it's a larger company that those sounds were taken from, goes after them, or even if it's a smaller company like myself, let's say somebody stole my sounds, put it in their expansion, and then I hear that sound, on a major label's track or something, and I say, oh, so you bought my expansion pack, and they're like, no. Or I look at my records and I don't see anybody associated with that production that has my expansion pack, I could get a come up on that. You know what I mean? So it's like it would behoove me to pay attention to that. So it's
a friend
like
of mine bought some sound packs, and this was really stealing, because the guy just downloaded the stuff from the internet and he didn't even remove the name from the cracking company on the folder names.
Wow.
That reminds me of watching a Future Music video they put out yesterday on YouTube. And there was a guy, I remember he had a huge record, it was a huge dance record last year, it was all over the radio. And you see he has silent and it has Team Air.
Oh, you're talking about a Koi?
No, the Martin guy. I think he's German.
Okay.
Martin is something with the G. But the We Are Animals guy. And it's at some point there has to be some kind of artistry here, but people are only really concerned about money. And yet money's important, but you can't throw away all your artistic values for the sake of getting paid.
Well, the thing is that the real truth of the matter is, in order to do sound design, in order to really produce brand new sounds from scratch, a lot of them, and have them actually sound good and cohesive, it's not easy. It takes a lot of time.
It takes a long time. Even with good source material. I did a recent
it takes,
refill that was dirty drums just from vinyl breaks that I was layering and what's the word I'm thinking? Like, I was making them my own. And it was a small kit, maybe like 30 megabytes, maybe. It was really small.
Mm-hmm.
And that still took me like a good 6 months to get done.
Yeah, and that's another thing, is that I think file size is very deceiving, because a loop, you could have a loop pack of 10 loops be a larger file size than 400 drums. You know what I mean? Because they're very small, samples. So like, to me, like the megabytes of a file, like a lot of times they need to be used. They need to be used to sell. But at the same time, it's very deceiving as far as what file size means. Moving on, I do want to just hit this real quick because he brings it up and it's new. Tone is asking about the drum synth in Machine, and let me just say how honestly impressed I am with it. The versatility of it.
It's awesome.
It is.
It's really awesome.
I have a lot of drum synth plugins, and it rivals the vast majority of the top ones. It can do a lot of things that even some of the better drum synth plugins can't do. And when you take it in context with the sequencer as well, it's really impressive.
What I like about it, it's a good starting point. It's somewhere good. 'Cause, like, I have Trimmer too by F Expansion.
Yeah, exactly.
And
That's like
Trimmer,
my next.
that's a straight up synth.
Yeah.
That's something. If you don't know synthesis, you're not going to get Trimmer. But anybody who just wants to make a basic drum sound, you're basically taking a sound source, a raw element source sound, and you're just tweaking it to your needs, which is great.
Yeah.
I love that about that synth.
It's also great when you use it for layering. Like you have like a really dull kick drum, and you're looking for something that is clear in the high end and give it a little bit more punch. You don't look for the sample anymore. You just throw in a drum synth and create it real quick, and you get the sound you need.
Yeah, I love layering it. I love layering it with I love layering drum synth sounds with samples. It works so well and it sounds so good, especially if you have a really well-tailored sample to layer with it and you phase match it up and it just sounds so great. It can be really fun. And yeah, I was just pulling this up, this Volca, because I love it. I love hardware, and this thing is super, super fun. But let me just say, for instance, the snare on this is terrible. It is absolutely horrible. The kick is great, but the snare on it is one of the worst snare sounds of an analog synth that I've heard. The snares that you can get out of Machine Studio or Machine 2, I mean, are just phenomenal. Like some of the synthesis that you can get out of it, and it doesn't have to be actual real analog. It's virtual analog, and they're doing interesting things with sampling. Like there's some interesting synthesis techniques that they're doing under the hood of that. Like there might be a limited amount of parameters that you're twisting the actual knobs of, but underneath the hood that Native Instruments did on those drum synths, it's a serious synthesis program that's going on there, and it sounds fantastic. So, I mean, to me, that was one of the coolest upgrades to Machine that needed to happen. Like, it was a really cool addition to it. I mean, I still feel like there is a lot that needs to be done. I feel like 2.0 was a leap forward with a lot of stubbing your toe at the same time, because it's a completely new engine. It's completely rewritten, and when they rewrote it, they had to emulate the old workflow with this new engine. So I understand a lot of the setbacks. I'm really looking forward to the future, though. I'm looking forward to the next 6 months to 12 months to seeing how they allow this new, freshly rejuvenated underpinning expand into so much more. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the synth and, like, I feel like the sequencer is where we're going to see major changes. Like, I'm really hoping the sequencer and the sampler itself are going to see major changes, and I'm hoping that it doesn't take forever. I'm hoping that we start seeing things like linear tracking and combination scenes and automation curves, not just automation points, but actual curves. Things like that need to start happening, and need to start happening sooner rather than later.
Right.
I feel like the competition is gonna, at this point, it's no longer just Machine in the game, And I'm interested to see if Roland decides whether or not they, because there's been rumors for the past 3 years at NAMM that Roland was going to come out with an MV hybrid, and it would be really interesting to see them step into the ring. I mean, Akai has done it.
I don't know about Roland. Because they had Cakewalk for a long time, and they've completely screwed up Sonar. There are like ideas that they implemented into Sonar, but then when you look at like how functional sonar is, it's broken and it's been broken for a long time. I don't know if I want to see Roland making sense, even though I hear Gibson bought them, Gibson guitars. Just with their track record with sonar, I don't know if I want to see them
Hmm.
delve too far into software. Let's let Roland stay hardware because they got hardware right, but they screw up software, kind of like Akai did. I'm not sure how much competition Machine
It's
has though.
true.
You have the MPC Renaissance and Push. I don't see too much more competition out there other than those two guys. And even Push is it's still kind of apples and oranges because Push is a keyboard replacement. It's not really like a drum machine like Machine is. It's like everything that Machine does right on the hardware but gets wrong in the software. Push is the opposite. They got the software right. Ableton's amazing, but they're still building upon that controller.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to judge something before it happens. When I first got wind of the Renaissance and what they were doing, I thought as about time. Um,
Mm-hmm. The
but I
MPC
was very,
16 should
very
have been that.
skeptical
Should have
at
been
the
the
same
run.
time because their software has never been their strong suit. You know what I mean? I mean, they've, ever since Roger Lynn was gone, they never really innovated, and they really just kind of like minor build-ons and things like that. And then they came out with newer versions that had a lot of faults in them and whatnot. Um, but that didn't mean that they couldn't have a fresh start. And then I saw what they were doing and a lot of the things that they were doing, which is a lot of trying to emulate the past and not look towards the future, you know, without trying to bring on too much baggage from the past.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what upset me the most, is that they had an opportunity to make the MPC much faster,
Mm-hmm.
much more performance oriented and studio oriented at the same time. And I felt like instead they decided to take the approach of, oh, well, we've been doing this for 20 years and that's what we're going to keep doing. And it's like, well, if you're going to do what worked 20 years ago, you better be able to also do what people are doing today. Because I'll tell you
Exactly.
what, printing a swing and things like that, that's a really old workflow, and it's just not working these days. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I see companies like who was it, F Expansion, doing things like Geist with their polyrhythms and all these interesting different methods of, of working with samples and patterns. It's, you got to think beyond the past. And that's where like Octatrack came in. Like when I saw Octatrack, which was the first real quality performance sampler that was hardware to come out in a long time. When I saw that, I was just like, man, um, that's something. That's a company that's actually willing to look towards the future. You know what I mean, as far as hardware is concerned. And I think that's where hardware has to go. Is if you're going to be using hardware, like a hardware sampler at least, these days, it's less of a studio scenario than it is a performance scenario. Because
Right.
like samplers with gigabytes of space and RAM and everything else, computer. There's nothing better for it. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is nothing better for it. Like you can't tell me that an MPC is going to be better in a studio scenario than any kind of software sampler, because you have infinite amount of space, infinite amount of RAM. You can integrate it perfectly, perfect syncing. But when you go out on the road, I'm not taking a big desktop computer with me. I want something that can manipulate samples interestingly on the fly. And that's where Octatrack comes in. You know what I mean? And I'm hoping that more, and even the OP1 and by Teenage Engineering, and you go into modular synthesis, you can look at the Make Noise Phonogene and the Harvestman Time Safari, and there's these interesting new samplers that are out there that are not using samples in the same way that we're used to. You know what I mean? That are, and even Beatthang, for as much of a debacle as it was, I mean, being able to like export things completely as it can, there's just a lot that, to me, like the old MPC hardware paradigm is gone. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
needed. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what
And that,
software is good at.
and that
Now,
reminds me.
that's what machine innovated.
hmm And that reminds me a lot of the conversation I think we were having on Facebook the other day, where I think people took me the wrong way. When what you touched on is exactly what I was talking about when I said relevance. I don't feel that the hardware sampler, when we talk about okay, MPC like the MPCO paradigm, the ASR tens, as we talk about, I feel that is totally relevant, just as you mentioned.
Hmm.
It's like machine killed that,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think going forward, you really have to have something that is easy to use on the fly. Like that's what I think the machine micro with a laptop does great. It's something that or even Mark II at this point. A Mark II is still very portable. You could do
The
that. You
micro
could
I
pull it.
can't stand. The micro, I'll be perfectly blunt. Like the micro doesn't do it for me at all. The
Mm,
micro to me is I don't like it. I really don't. I
just too much.
love like if you're gonna get if you want to save a few bucks and get a machine, I would rather have a machine MK1 or a machine MK2 over any of the micros, because to me the MK2 and MK1 both work great. I feel like the MK2 is really good build quality, so I would try to go for that if you can go for anything. But its workflow it's pretty on par with the Studio. I mean, if you're comfortable with using, and I've got all different models. I have every model of machine, and if you're comfortable using this, you can fly on this every bit as fast as a Studio, without a doubt. But to me, like, I mean, the Studio is obviously luxury, but the Micro, I can't fly as fast on the Micro as I can on an MK2 or an MK1. It's just the single screen. I can get around using the shortcuts, but the sample editing and the automation is just not as good, from a hardware design perspective. So I'm really, really hoping that they come out with an MK3 Micro that is sleeker, because I also feel like it doesn't need to be quite as chunky as it was, and I want at least two knobs. Give it a browse knob and give it a smooth knob. Like, it needs at least two knobs. And the screen wasn't terrible. It's small, but it's not terrible. It could work for what it is. But the fact is that on the knob on it, it has I have one around here somewhere. Oh, right here, right in front of me. It has notches when you turn it. Like when you turn it, it clicks. And the problem with that is that when you're trying to edit samples, those clicks get in the way. Unless they really change the firmware and make it so that each click can be super fine. And, I mean, there's things that they could do, but to me, the clicking just doesn't work for me. Like, give me smooth.
Makes sense. All right. With that, now I know we said we were going to stream for an hour. I don't know how anybody's time constraints are. We've been on here for 2 hours.
Yeah, I think we're ready to go. But
I think we should wrap it up.
For first show.
I gotta bounce. It's already past midnight here in Germany, and I have to work tomorrow.
Ah.
I hear that.
Well, listen, I had a pleasure talking with you guys, and
We're definitely gonna do this again.
and it was great seeing the people in the chat room as well. So you can check me out on YouTube, Flux302 on YouTube, and fluxwithit.com, and you guys.
All right, and of course you can check me out on YouTube, youtube.com/DJKevWest, or you could check out KevWestBeats.com. I have so much more material there than I do just on YouTube, where I'm doing written articles, I'm doing reviews. I want to start releasing sound packs there too, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. A lot more stuff on KevWestBeats.com than there is on YouTube. So of course check that out, and go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I don't have that much stuff going on my private sites at the moment, so I'm relating back to the Facebook group, facebook.com/group/the producers hangout. If you have any additional questions, just ask them there. We try to answer it. And yeah, it was really fun, and I'm looking forward to the next show.
Yeah.
Probably after NAMM, so we have a lot of interesting things. Hopefully, we have a lot of interesting things to discuss then.
And if you have topics or anything that you want us to address, just post it in the Facebook group, and we'll kind of set them aside and see if we can get to them. And as the shows go on, we're gonna get more comfortable, more smooth, and it should work out.
Exactly. Now, and I just want to make sure, so everybody's aware of the schedule. Is everybody still good with the second Sunday every month? We were doing it 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and I think what's that for you, Mike? Like 10 p.m.?
Yeah, it's
Yep.
10 p.m. in Central European time.
Okay. So I think we're still good there. So for anybody checking this out, I can grab my calendar, and I
We might need to
think
move
that'll
move
be.
it up an hour for Mike.
So right now, let's plan for February the 9th. Sound good?
Exactly.
And you can check
Sounds
the
Okay.
good.
Facebook group for more details on that. So
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
peace.